Welcome back to Hannity. So yesterday, after President Trump announced that the U.S. will be withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, I was joined right here on the program by Vice President Mike Pence. Now, in part two of our interview, we talk about all these left-wing attacks on the president and his family and Russia, Russia, Russia. Take a look. I want to ask you, this is interesting. I think we live in unprecedented times. I have chronicled on this program every vicious, vile, hateful thing, culminating this week with what Kathy Griffin did. But the attacks against the First Lady, the president's 11-year-old son, and even when he was 10 years old, but having to see that this week, the attacks against Ivanka, the things that have been said against her, everybody that works for the president. We've never seen anything like Russia, 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 Russia. 24/7 cable news now. And yet we're told there's no evidence at all of any collusion. What is your reaction to this, and does it get in the way of the ability of the president to do the job he was elected to do?
Well, I'll answer the last part of the question first. It absolutely doesn't get in the way. President Trump is one of the most resilient and determined people I've ever met in my life. I mean, he literally gets up every day facing a gale force wind of negative coverage in the mainstream press, and he just rolls his sleeves up and goes to work for the American people. I think the decision on the Paris Climate Agreement, the progress we've made rolling back an avalanche of regulation from the last administration, the progress we're making to repeal and replace Obamacare, the way he's re-engaged the world to have our allies begin to live up to their commitments in our common security, all give evidence of the fact that while his detractors in the media will continue to come straight at this administration every single day, the president's focus, I can assure you, is on the American people, on their future, on their challenges, on their opportunities, and that's where it's going to stay.
I want to go back for one thing, because the attacks against his family have been vicious and vile, and if it ever happened, I think, during the Obama years, we would have a very different media reaction. But I want to stay on Clapper and Comey and Brennan and Admiral Rogers and even Maxine Waters, Dianne Feinstein, Joe Manchin have all said, even recently, no evidence at all to date Russia collusion. I guess the question is, when you see such breathless coverage every day, I know the president's not shy about battling back against the media. I think that's probably his strongest quality, is he fights for what he believes in. But it's got to get tiresome in there at some time.
Well, you think that it would, but I want to assure all of your viewers all over the country that in President Donald Trump, they've got someone who has the ability to turn his face like flint against the wind and tune out the detractors and focus on keeping his promises to the American people. I mean, whether it be the attacks on his family, which this week were just deplorable in some instances, and I think denounced by people across the political spectrum properly, or whether it's just the day in, day out drumbeat of the media chasing after whatever Washington, D.C. is talking about. This is a president who knows that this economy has been burdened under the weight of high taxes, regulations that have been stifling American growth, and he's fighting every single day to turn loose the strength of this economy. I spoke at the Naval Academy about a week ago, Sean, and was able to tell them that you now have a commander-in-chief who's fighting to rebuild our military, restore the arsenal of democracy. They have a commander-in-chief who will have their back and be the best friend our armed forces have ever had. And the ovation that I got from the crowd and from all those midshipmen was overwhelming. They know it. Our armed forces know it. Our law enforcement know it. The American people know it. President Donald Trump is fighting for them every day, and he's going to keep doing that for the next 7.5 years.
I guess as a conservative that wants this agenda passed, because I support the agenda, I'm looking at the legislative calendar. And by the way, I know you used to be in Congress. Congress takes so many days off, it's unfathomable to me. That's my own personal opinion. I don't live my life that way. But my point is, there's only 30-some-odd days on the legislative calendar. And you've got to finish with health care in the Senate and in conference and get it to the president's desk. You got to get his economic plan, I would argue, this year. I know he's taken the regulatory steps towards energy independence. I think that's key. And I think that by the end of this year, Americans are going to want to see part of that wall built. He succeeded with Neil Gorsuch. Is there Do you see all that happening by the end of the year, or are you concerned, like I'm concerned, that Congress is moving way too slow?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic because we're seeing steady progress in the United States Senate. Republican members in the Senate are working very diligently. I was in meetings over the last several weeks as the session came to a close before the Memorial Day break, and I see the sides moving closer to coming together with a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. I'll also tell you in the House of Representatives, Sean, there's very detailed discussions on what could well be one of the largest tax cuts in American history. We're also looking at rolling back the onerous burden that Dodd-Frank placed on community banks around the country, drying up capital for small businesses to be able to grow. And the president's committed to an infrastructure bill. His number is $1 trillion to rebuild America's infrastructure so it'll be the best in the world. What I see up close and personal, and you know I'm on Capitol Hill a lot, is that members of the Republican majority in the House and Senate are working very diligently with this president to move the agenda forward. But there's a lot of work yet to be done, and as you said, there's a limited time to do it. But I'm cautiously optimistic that come the end of this year, we're going to deliver on repealing and replacing Obamacare. We're going to pass tax cuts, and you're going to see an economy roaring and continue to grow under a president who's fighting every day for the forgotten men and women of America.
Well, I always called this the forgotten man election, and for those people that are the millions in poverty on food stamps and out of the labor force and the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years, that the agenda is important for them, and I wish you all our best in getting that done. Mr. Vice President, always good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Sean. Great to be with you.